Look at you. Wrinkled dress, messy hair, lips trembling. You look more like a beggar than the mother of a cop. Deputy Kyle Remsen didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice was low, but each word dropped like ice water cold, scornful, and deliberately cruel. Elderly Mabel Johnson clutched her worn-out purse tighter in her hands, her voice quivering but still polite. I just want to see my son, Elias Johnson. He works here. Kyle let out a mocking laugh. Elias Johnson. Here, who are you talking about? The police chief. You think that guy's got time for some old black lady rambling around? I don't mean to trouble anyone. You're already trouble. Kyle stepped out from behind the front desk, his boots thudding deliberately, each step a threat. What do you think this is, huh? A nursing home? Or maybe you think you're some kind of queen mother who gets to see whoever she wants. Mabel looked up, her voice barely a whisper. I'm Elias's mother. Don't care whose mother you are. Kyle sneered, grabbing a water bottle from the desk and shaking it slightly. But judging by that look, you must be hot. Mabel took a step back. No, please don't. Snap! He twisted the cap. Splash! The cold water hit her square in the face, soaking her silver hair and gaunt cheeks. Her dress clung to her. Her shoes slipped. One hand reached for the edge of the counter. The other trembled as she tried to wipe her face. Kyle tossed the empty bottle to the ground with a shrug. There, all cooled off now. Mother of a cop! The lobby fell completely silent. No one even dared to breathe. Then, from behind Kyle, a voice rang out. Not loud, but heavy. Like a gunshot. How's my mother doing? Kyle turned around. There stood Police Chief Elias Johnson, eyes locked, unblinking. The entire station froze in place. The floor of the Glen Haven Police Department was just as cold as always. But now, the air itself felt frozen. Deputy Kyle Remsen didn't move, and Mabel soaked, shivering, and dazed hadn't yet looked up to see her son walk in. Chief Elias Johnson, tall and sharp in his uniform, stood at the doorway. For a moment, he didn't speak, didn't move. He just looked. His eyes scanned his mother's wet, sagging hair, each drop falling onto the tiled floor like a countdown. Her frail hand still gripped that old leather purse, the one she never let go since his father passed away. Sheriff, I didn't know she was. Kyle stammered, taking a half step back. His mouth was dry. Cold sweat lined his forehead. Elias didn't reply. He walked forward, one step at a time. Each footfall echoed in the lobby low and heavy, like the drumbeat of justice approaching. He took off his police jacket and gently draped it over his mother's shoulders. I'm here. Mom. His voice wasn't loud, but deep strained, like he was holding back a storm in his chest. Mabel looked up, eyes squinting. Elias, yes, it's me. He held her frail shoulders gently. At that moment, every pair of eyes in the room reception staff, waiting civilians, fellow officers shifted to them. Some looked down, some turned away, some flushed with shame. But Kyle Remsen, he went pale, like a dead man still standing. He stumbled back and hit the front desk. Elias turned his head. His eyes weren't red with rage. They were steel. Deputy Remsen. His words struck like hammered nails. Sheriff. I didn't know she was your mother. If I had, I swear. And if she wasn't, Elias cut him off. His tone stayed level, but his gaze pierced through Kyle like a blade. You think it's okay to humiliate an elderly black woman just because she's poor and unknown. Kyle couldn't respond. His throat clenched shut. He looked around. No one came to his defense. Elias continued, now addressing not just Kyle, but the entire room. I don't care who she is, whose mother she is, where she came from. No one deserves to be treated like that. Not in this station. Not under my watch. He turned to the receptionist. Call Officer Barnes from Internal Affairs. Deputy Remsen is temporarily suspended. Remove his firearm. No contact with personnel until the investigation is complete. A hush swept the room. Then whispers, then footsteps. Kyle tried to find his voice. Sheriff. Silence. Elias snapped. If you have any dignity left. Mabel gently pulled the jacket tighter around her. Her hair was still wet, but her eyes had softened. She whispered to her son. You didn't have to get angry. I'm okay. Elias didn't answer. But the look he gave Kyle, that wasn't the anger of a son. That was the realization of a leader facing the rot in the very system he had sworn to protect. The back door swung open. Officer Barnes from Internal Affairs stepped in, followed by 2 admin personnel. Elias pointed. Escort Deputy Remsen to the isolation room. Collect his weapon and badge. 14-day suspension. Immediate investigation. Kyle didn't resist. He knew. Everything he had built, his arrogance on his badge, his whiteness, his entitlement was crumbling, piece by piece. And Elias, the black man he once mocked as a diversity hire, was the one breaking it apart, with the very badge Kyle used to sneer at. The next morning, Glenhaven woke up like nothing had happened. The farmer's market was still bustling. The bakery still smelled of warm cinnamon. Neighbors nodded hello just like they did every day. But in the corner of a small coffee shop near the gas station, a 31-second video began quietly spreading, accompanied by just one caption. Racist cop pours water on elderly black woman, then finds out who her son is. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. An old, frail woman shaking, drenched as a white officer dumped an entire bottle of water over her head. The sound of water splashing, her weak voice, "Please don't," followed by a sneer, "You're cooled off now." Mother of a cop. At second 29, a low voice cut through from off camera. "How's my mother doing?" Then, cut to black. Right as every pair of eyes turned toward the man who had just entered the room, Sheriff Elias Johnson. Across town, in a back office at the Glenhaven PD, Emily Tran sat frozen, a final-year law intern. Her fingers clenched around her phone, her face pale. She had been the one who recorded the video. She hadn't meant to go public. She just wanted to document the truth so it wouldn't disappear, like hundreds of other moments had before. But last night, after getting home, a message lit up her phone. Anonymous. Untraceable. "You want to graduate, kid, or you want to be blacklisted from every law firm in the state." No name, no signature, just a threat. But Emily knew that kind of silence all too well. She'd seen it in the eyes of officers when they looked at her, in the way male colleagues ignored her every time she asked a question that went too far. And that morning, she posted the video to Reddit under an anonymous account. She didn't care about views. She just wanted to make sure no one could deny it. Back at Glenhaven PD, Sheriff Elias Johnson sat in his office, sleeves rolled up, eyes hollow from a sleepless night. His mother was still at the local health center. Doctors said she was okay, just tired and shaken. But Elias knew. It wasn't the water that broke her. It was the look, the words, the feeling of being treated like garbage while no one stood up for her. The door swung open. Officer Janine Morris entered, a deep crease on her brow. "Sheriff, you need to see this." She placed an iPad on the desk. In just 12 hours, the video had crossed 400,000 views. The hashtag #JusticeForMabel was trending on Twitter. Messages from national news outlets were flooding in CNN, MSNBC, CBS. Elias watched the video in silence, eyes locked on the screen. When the final moment played, his own voice cutting through, he turned to Janine. "Do we know who recorded it?" Janine shook her head. "Not yet. Anonymous post, but definitely someone from inside." Elias nodded. Good," she asked. "Confused? I mean, someone in this building still has a conscience. And courage." That afternoon, Kyle Remsen slammed his fist on the internal affairs desk. "That video. Who the hell filmed that? Who set me up? Remsen! Calm down," Officer Barnes warned. "You're under investigation." I was framed. That old lady was planted. Come on. You've known me for years. I'm a veteran. I got a commendation from the last mayor. Barnes looked up, his eyes going cold. The same mayor who buried 3 formal complaints against you. Kyle froze. "You thought no one knew?" Barnes continued. "I stayed quiet. The system stayed silent. But now the people have seen." Kyle kicked over a chair and stormed out. But this time no one followed. No one patted his back. No one defended him. That night, at Woodcrest Care Home, Elias sat by his mother's bedside. "I don't know where this is going." "Mom," he whispered, holding her thin, cold hand. Mabel looked up. Her eyes were clouded and tired, but filled with depth. "Don't let them forget how they looked at me, like I wasn't even human." She swallowed hard. "Not for me, but for the other women out there, the mothers, who don't have sons in a sheriff's uniform." Elias lowered his head. His mother's hand gripped his, and from weakness, but with a will still pulsing strong through every worn-down finger. And in that moment, Elias understood. This was no longer personal, no longer just about revenge. This was about a question, one that the whole system needed to answer. If there hadn't been a camera, if there hadn't been a video, if her son hadn't been the sheriff, would anyone have believed a 78-year-old black woman? And Elias swore Glen Haven would answer that question, whether it wanted to or not. Later that afternoon, after back-to-back meetings, Elias returned to Woodcrest. As he entered the courtyard, the first thing he noticed was her silver hair, so familiar. But something was different. His mother was sitting alone on a stone bench, staring quietly at the sky, slowly fidgeting with the edge of her purse, like she was trying to remember something. A nurse leaned in and whispered softly, "She's starting to get confused." "Sheriff." Today she asked why her dress was wet. Elias froze. Just as the world was finally beginning to remember her, his mother was beginning to forget. 3 days after the incident, Mabel Johnson began to forget. Not her son's name, not the way home, but why her dress was wet, why the people visiting her looked at her with quiet pity. "Sweetheart, have you had lunch yet?" she asked Elias as he brought a bowl of soup to her room. "I did." "Mom, I already ate." "You want some?" Elias smiled, though his heart felt like stone. "Okay, what day is it today again?" She furrowed her brow. "Friday." "Mom." "Then, you didn't come yesterday. she whispered. Elias froze. He had been by her side for the last 3 days, hour by hour, minute by minute. Her memory was like shattered glass, sometimes clear, sometimes foggy, sometimes cutting the son who held it without knowing. He said nothing, just leaned in and gently raised a spoonful of hot soup to her lips, just like she once did for him. When he was a feverish child and she nursed him through long nights. But the moment the spoon touched her lips, she flinched. "Ah, don't hit me," she cried out, recoiling and shielding her head. The spoon dropped from Elias's hand. "Mom, it's me. It's Elias." Her eyes stared blankly for a few seconds, then softened. "You, Elias," she panted. I thought, he came back. That officer, Kyle. Elias gripped her hand tightly, like he was holding on to the last piece of her memory that still remained. "No, Mom, no one's going to hurt you again. No one dares." But inside him, a new fear had awoken. If his mother forgot, could she still be a witness? Would her testimony, her trauma, her fear, her broken dignity still carry weight if her mind slowly slipped away like mist? At Internal Affairs, Officer Barnes was facing another kind of problem. Anonymous emails, warning texts, files mysteriously missing. It all started after the video went viral. A junior employee named Jaden came into his office. "Sir, I opened Remsen's file last night. It was tagged archived, awaiting review. But this morning, it's empty." Barnes narrowed his eyes. "Who has clearance to make edits? Only senior admin. But I checked the access logs. There were no logins overnight. No traces, no strange IPs, no unauthorized activity. Which meant someone inside the system knew how to erase without leaving a trace." Elias wasn't new to these convenient technical issues either. That morning, a black SUV had parked in front of his house for almost 30 minutes, engine running, windows blacked out. When he stepped outside, the vehicle peeled off and disappeared. Twice, his phone displayed error, sending message when he tried emailing Internal Affairs. Nothing concrete, no threats, no names, but it felt like smoke. And Elias knew smoke meant fire. The departmental meeting that afternoon was tense, like a pulled wire ready to snap. Elias stood in front of his senior officers, everyone in uniform, but not everyone unified. Some looked him in the eye, acknowledging. Others stared at the floor, avoiding. And a few stared back, cold as stone. He spoke slowly, clearly. "We're not dealing with a personal issue. This is a test of our entire system. Remsen is just the surface. But if anyone here ever treated abuse of power as a privilege, looked down on the public, treated prejudice like a routine," he paused, "then take this as your warning. That era is over." A senior officer named Lambert Salt and Pepper Hare, 25 years in service, stood with arms crossed. "And if someone in this room doesn't agree with you," Sheriff Elias met his gaze, "then I invite them to walk out of this room before I make them." No one stood, but the silence said enough. Not everyone wanted change, and some were willing to fight against it. That night, Elias got home late. In his mailbox was a plain envelope. No name, no return address. Inside, just a small printed note. "The sheriff should know better. The deeper you dig, the more bodies you bury. And some people don't want to be buried." Elias sat silently in his car, lights off, surrounded by darkness. But inside him, a light was still burning, flickering. Maybe, but alive. He knew one thing for sure. When the powerless finally begin to be seen, those in the shadows will do everything they can to shut their eyes, sir. But he also knew, when his mother, a frail, fading woman, once humiliated in public, was still trying to remember, still trying to stand, he no longer had the right to forget. The next morning, Elias Johnson arrived at the Glen Haven Police Department earlier than usual. No coffee in hand, no greetings exchanged in the hallway. Inside his coat pocket was the unsigned threat from the night before, but inside his chest was something stronger. A decision forged through a sleepless night. If I dig deep and find bones underground, I'm not covering them back up. An emergency staff meeting was called for 9:00 a.m. All senior officers were present. Tension hung in the air like steel wire. Most assumed the sheriff would announce disciplinary action for Remsen and quietly close the chapter. Standard, by the book, restore the calm. But Elias hadn't come to do what was easy. He stood tall at the podium, eyes steady, voice firm, not loud, but every word landed like a hammer on stone. We have a problem, and its name isn't Kyle Remsen. Some in the room shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced at each other. Remsen is the symptom. The real disease is how you let it happen, how you let it go, and how you stayed silent. He pulled out 3 old complaint files and slapped them down on the table. 3 reports, same officer, same behavior, and all 3 shelved for lack of evidence. I wasn't here then, he said slowly, but I'm here now, and I want to know who signed off on burying these complaints. The room went still. Someone cleared their throat. A pen tapped nervously against a folder. Then a voice replied. We followed department protocol. Lieutenant Daniel McCready, former acting chief before Elias took over. And what protocol is that? Elias shot back. Disregard complaints if the victim's poor, if they don't have a lawyer, if they're black women. McCready's brow tightened. You accusing the entire department, numb, Elias said, shaking his head. I'm accusing collective cowardice, the kind of loyalty that protects wrongdoing instead of justice, the kind that hides behind badges to excuse abuse. After that meeting, the crack in the wall became visible. In the parking garage, a small group of officers gathered. The new sheriff thinks he's a hero. One muttered, he messes with the wrong people. He'll find out what real power looks like. Another took a long drag from his cigarette and sighed. I used to think the kid was a warrior. Now he sounds more like a prosecutor than a cop. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs received a new anonymous tip. It alleged that a young officer named Andre Lewis had previously witnessed Remsen's violent behavior, but said nothing. When summoned, Andre sat quietly, eyes on the floor. Elias entered the room personally. He wasn't angry. He only asked one question. Did you see him push a woman to the ground after she refused to open her trunk? Andre nodded. Did you hear him call a black teen a disrespectful little monkey? Andre nodded again this time, tears rising in his eyes. Why didn't you speak up? Andre choked back emotion. Because I was new. Because I was the only black officer on patrol that night. Because I watched another colleague speak up once, and they sent him to the border district, no support, no backup, no one defending him. The room was silent. Elias took a deep breath. You stayed silent. But today you're here, and I won't let fear control you anymore. Andre looked up for the first time with eyes that held hope. That same week, the investigation into Remsen was officially reopened. 2 other missing complaint files were recovered thanks to copies kept by a retired admin assistant. One of the reports involved the wrongful arrest of a 14-year-old boy. Mistaken identity, pinned to the ground, a broken wrist. When the family filed a lawsuit, the case was handled internally. No press, no inquiry. The only person who wrote a full report, Officer Rebecca Miles, who left the force 2 years ago. Elias called her himself. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been waiting 2 years for this call." But while Elias raced toward the truth, a storm was building inside the department. An anonymous email spread through the internal network. "If you don't know how to protect the uniform, you don't deserve to wear it. Sheriff Johnson is turning us into a political target." Some officers began delaying cooperation with internal affairs. Others filed for temporary transfers. They gave no reasons, but everyone understood they were choosing sides. That night, Elias came home late. This time, there was no threat in his mailbox. There was a photograph, a printed photo faded with time. 8-year-old Elias, standing with his mother outside their old home. He held an empty soda can. Behind them, a white police officer towered over Mabel, yelling at her for disturbing the peace in a quiet neighborhood. No note, no handwriting, just a memory, dug up like a ghost from the past. A reminder, don't forget where you came from. Elias gripped the photo tightly, eyes burning. He hadn't forgotten, and this time he would be the one to remind the entire town. The next morning, Elias brought that photo to the office. He placed it on his desk, right next to a stack of complaint files buried for years. That photo wasn't just memory. It was a warning, a reminder that what he was facing wasn't just about one corrupt officer. It was the result of years of compromise, fear, and systemic silence. He couldn't handle this behind closed doors anymore. He couldn't keep it in the family. The rot had gone too deep, and Elias made a decision. It was time to bring everything into the light. He formally requested the city council to convene an emergency hearing, a public forum, with media, with the townspeople, with the people who deserved to know the truth. And that afternoon, all of Glen Haven showed up at City Hall. The town hall chamber had never been this full. Every seat was taken. Locals packed the aisles. TV crews lined the walls. Tripods stood like sentinels. Several live streams were already rolling. Everyone knew this wasn't about internal police business anymore. This was about the soul of their town. At the hearing table sat 5 members of Glen Haven's City Council, an interim mayor, 3 white commissioners, and 1 black woman commissioner, Carmen Hayes. She was the only one looking at Elias with eyes full of concern and thoughtfulness. Elias stepped up to the podium. No documents, no slideshow. Just a son, a leader, a man who had watched his mother be humiliated in the very building where he swore to protect the vulnerable. Deputy Remsen poured water over my mother's head. Elias began, voice steady and low, not a tremor in his tone, not because she did anything wrong, not because she posed a threat, but because she was an elderly black woman who dared to step into a place he didn't think she belonged. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Elias fixed his gaze on the council. But what worries me more is what happened after. He lifted a folder, files shelved, reports disappeared, witnesses threatened anonymously. And while I tried to pull light into this room, some people were busy drawing the curtains shut. Commissioner Marcus Ellery, silver hair, navy suit, voice soaked in politics, leaned back in his chair. "Sheriff Johnson, we understand your emotions, but the incident is under investigation. Publicly overriding internal processes sets a dangerous precedent." Elias gave a cold, steel-edged smile. You know what's dangerous, silence. What's dangerous is letting someone with a badge use it to humiliate a woman and then get placed on paid leave while their performance is reviewed. Another commissioner cut in, but aren't citizens now worried about their safety? About the integrity of our police force, Elias locked eyes with him. Safety doesn't come from hiding the truth. Integrity doesn't come from protecting the guilty. It comes from correction, from transparency, from doing the right thing, even when it's not comfortable. The crowd stirred. Some nodded. A few began to clap. Off to the right, family members and neighbors of Mabel Johnson sat with tears in their eyes. But not everyone was on board. An older man supervisor of the patrol division stood up. Council members, I won't defend what Deputy Remsen did, but I must be clear. Sheriff Johnson is using one personal incident to stir outrage against the entire force. It's demoralizing. It's dividing the department. Elias didn't argue. He turned to the people instead. That night, my mother walked into a police station and had water poured on her head. No one stood up. No one intervened. And if I hadn't walked in when I did, it all would have been swept under the rug. He paused. But not everyone has a son who's the sheriff. So the real question is, if it wasn't my mother, who would have protected her? Commissioner Hayes' sole black voice on the council nodded softly. Her voice rang out. Slow, but sure. We've spent too much time worrying about optics, about media fallout. But no one's talking about the human cost. Mrs. Mabel may forget, but we are not allowed to. And if this system needs to shake to remember what's right, then let it shake. The room erupted in applause, this time louder, longer. After the hearing, reporters swarmed Elias. Sheriff Johnson, are you afraid of losing support from within your department? He replied plainly. If someone needs me to look the other way to feel comfortable, then they don't belong in law enforcement. Another asked, do you trust that your department won't retaliate against you? Elias didn't smile. I trust the truth, and I know this. When you force a system to look in the mirror, there will always be those who try to shatter the mirror. That night, Elias stood alone in his office, outside. The red and blue lights from patrol cars blinked softly. Civilians lingered outside headquarters, placing flowers beneath a large printed photo of Mabel Johnson. The banner read, "You are seen. You are loved." His phone rang. It was from the hospital. The night nurse was on the line. Mrs. Mabel just asked, "Who helped dry the water from my hair that day? Sweetheart." Elias closed his eyes. The ache rose again. But in the center of that pain was a quiet, burning resolve. Even if she forgot, he would remember for her. Remember to make it right. Remember to fight. Remember so that no one else has to walk into a police station and walk out carrying shame. 10 days after the public hearing, the official investigation opened in the Glen Haven County Courthouse. Deputy Kyle Remsen appeared in a gray suit. No uniform, no badge. His face was pale, his eyes vacant. Beside him sat his private attorney, a silver-haired man known for one thing: turning guilt into misunderstanding. Across the room sat Sheriff Elias Johnson, back straight, silent, expressionless, but his eyes deep, calm, held the memory of every person who'd ever been silently humiliated and told to forget it. The first witness is Emily Tran, the young intern. The one who had filmed the now famous video walked to the stand. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. "Ms. Tran," Remsen's attorney began, "are you certain the video was taken by you?" Emily nodded. "Yes, I filmed it. I saw it. and I stayed silent for too long. You're aware that filming inside a police department violates internal regulations. Elias stood up, interrupting Your Honor. If not for that unauthorized recording, this town would still believe an elderly black woman made the whole thing up. No objections. The judge gave a nod. The trial continued. Second witness officer, Andre Lewis. The young officer walked slowly to the stand. His face showed remorse, but this time, he didn't lower his head. I was in the lobby that day. I saw Remsen holding the water bottle. I saw him pour it over Mrs. Mabel Johnson's head. Why didn't you intervene? The attorney asked. Andre swallowed hard. Because I was new. Because I was scared. But I was wrong. And I'm here today to make it right with the truth. The room grew quiet. Then the judge spoke again. Call Mrs. Mabel Johnson. A side door opened. She entered slowly, supported by a nurse. Her silver hair was neatly combed. Her dress, simple lavender. And her eyes, cloudy, unclear, were full of time and trauma. She sat in the witness chair. The entire courtroom held its breath. Elias stared at his mother. His hands clenched the sides of his seat. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what she would remember. He only knew, even if she forgot. The truth still remained. Mrs. Johnson, the attorney began gently. Do you remember what happened that day? She pressed her lips together. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. There have been many days. My son visits often. What about the day you went to the police station? Her head tilted slightly. Her expression tightened. There was water. Laughter. I remember. I was cold. So cold. Silence. She slowly turned to Kyle Remsen, her first time looking him in the eye, and said, clearly, you looked at me like I was trash, and you said, all cooled off now, mother of a cop. Remsen flinched. Elias closed his eyes, not from pain, but from relief. She remembered, just one sentence, but the one that mattered most. At the end of the session, the judge read the preliminary ruling. After reviewing the evidence, witness testimony, and the verified video footage, we find sufficient grounds to pursue criminal charges against Deputy Kyle Remsen for abuse of power, public misconduct, and gross ethical violations. Recommendation: full termination of service, indefinite suspension from all law enforcement roles, and transfer of this case to the state prosecutor for criminal proceedings. Kyle said nothing. He just stood there, color drained from his face, as the last badge on his personnel record was removed. A deputy escorted him from the courtroom. No handcuffs. But from the slump in his shoulders, he didn't need them. He was already shackled by the collapse of the world he once thought was unmatchable. Outside the courthouse, the crowd applauded, not in thunderous movie-style cheers, but in a long, collective exhale, like a weight had been lifted from Glenhaven's chest after years of pressure. A middle-aged black man whispered her father got beat for defending my mother when a cop groped her at the market. They didn't believe him, but today we saw truth win. 4 weeks after the investigation, Kyle Remsen was officially indicted. His case was escalated to the state court. 3 senior officers at the Glenhaven Police Department were dismissed for covering up complaints and manipulating internal reports. Elias didn't hold a press conference. He didn't celebrate. He spent that day in silence, beside his mother, helping her trim white chrysanthemums on the porch. That autumn afternoon, Elias wheeled her gently back to the care home. The trees were golden, the wind soft. Just before he left, Mabel suddenly reached for his hand and whispered, "Yeah, Are you sure? You did the right thing. Elias knelt beside her, held her hand, and smiled. Mom, I didn't just do the right thing. I did exactly what you taught me to do. She let out a quiet laugh, then closed her eyes peacefully. And Elias, standing there, watched the sunset cast a warm glow over her silver hair, like a final light resting on the woman who had sparked a fire for justice.